Hi everyone, this is Corneille, and you're watching thisisrealmusic.com.
You found me such a mess, until you took my hand and held me out of numbness, became my truest friend.
What's up, y'all? This is thisisrealmusic.com. We're here with Corneille, and we're going to pretty much talk to him about his current projects, his beginnings in music, and pretty much everything in between. So for the people that may not be familiar with you, or in the U.S. side, I should say, we'll just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell them, how you started into music.
Sure. My name is Corneille. I was actually born Cornelius, but that's another story. But my name is Corneille, and I was born in Germany. Was raised in Rwanda. I've been living in Montreal, Canada now for 11 years.
Okay. And how did you first become, interested in actually making music?
I was interested in music at a very young age. Around maybe 11, 12 years old, I was starting to develop an interest in music, and not just the entertainment of it, but I was already starting to, come up with some melodies and hum some melodies that I would come up with. And from that age on, I pretty much started developing a passion for the creative part of music, and wanting to be part of it at a higher level than just listening to it and being entertained by it. And at the age of 16, I had my first band in Rwanda. Four guys from the neighborhood in school, and we would sing a whole lot of, we'd do a lot of a cappella stuff, and our models were, Boyz II Men and Jodeci and all these. Ironically enough, we were listening to a lot of African American music, even though we were living in a French-speaking African country. But that's what we were into, and so it was around that age that things became really concrete. We were starting to sing, somewhat professionally, because we were still going to school, but it was somewhat professional. We took it really seriously, and I started writing around that time as well, so around 16, 17 years old.
Okay. And you touched on, again, the African-American influence there. What do you think is the main reason behind, so many artists now emerging from Africa or African origin, essentially, from Asa to Canaan, or, there's a bunch of artists now that are pretty much showing up now that, may not always have been around. I think, for me, I think the earliest artist that I remember seeing or hearing that was pretty much from Africa was probably Fela.
Mm-hmm.
Was the first one. But since then, I feel like there's a gap in between, and now there's this boom of just all these African artists from all different kinds of the world pretty much producing music. What do you think that's behind that right now?
I would say that for some reason Africa is playing a much more obviously important role in the world. It might not be that obvious now, but it will be in the coming years. Africa is going to play a major role, and economically in the global economy, and I think a lot of Western countries have been sensing that. And in the last couple of years, we've observed a higher interest to Africa. There's a resurgence of that interest or that curiosity about Africa that wasn't there before necessarily, and so maybe that makes it so that the Western audience might be a little more open to the idea of an artist with an African background, because maybe Africa is getting less and less foreign and more familiar. Whereas 10 years ago Africa was just that foreign land, if anything, kind of a godforsaken place where only catastrophes and bad things happen. Not that it's really changed all that much today, but at least there's an acceptance of something else coming from out of Africa that is not, genocide, famine, and AIDS. And if anything, there's an interest to a different way to talk about it, or different tales out of Africa than what the media brings to the audience. And I think artists are, African artists are going to play a major role in bringing about a new image of Africa, or maybe talking about Africa in a new light.
How much of the production did you actually do in your last album? How involved were you in the production?
I'm very involved in the production. I produce my own records, and I've done that for my first French record on. And it was something that is kind of how I learned to make music. I can't even say that I learned it. That's just how I perceive it. To me, music is a song, but the song comes with a sound, and I cannot disassociate both. It comes together. So as I come up with a melody and with an arrangement, there's a sound. There's a specific sound that I'm hearing. There's a specific choice of drum sound that I'm hearing. A specific choice of a bass sound that I'm hearing. A specific choice of arrangement, and it all comes together as a whole. And so that's how I have evolved as a musician and as an artist, to always think about a song in its entire global picture, as opposed to thinking about it, from a lyrical point of view and a musical point of view and a production point of view, and have those sides isolated from each other. They all come. Yeah, it's one thing. It all comes together, and that's how I've been approaching music for as long as I can remember.
We want to talk a little bit about the latest album that you already finished to put out, and people may know, obviously the single, the video from VH1, but you wanted to kind of just talk about a little bit, tell them the name of the album. And,
Sure. The current album is called The-Birth-of-Cornelius. And as I said earlier, Cornelius is my name at birth, but I changed it at the age of 7 because it was not the coolest name to have as a 7-year-old in a Catholic French-speaking country. So I kind of changed that to Corneille. But The Birth of Cornelius is an album that is my English debut, and it's something that it came to me as I was thinking about the reasons why I was making this album. Why an English album at this point, at this joint, at this venture in my life, where I could have, I have a very successful French album. Why break that now? It's usually something that strategically people do after, a third or fourth, especially, definitely after the third, that establishing album. But I wanted to do it at that point, and the reason was because I was going through a lot of personal changes and experiences where I gave myself the right to own me and everything that I was at the time, and not surrender to the pressures of media and industry or whatever anyone else might expect of me, and go back to my musical roots. And my musical roots happen to be in the English language, because the artists that I was listening to were all Americans, most of them. And so The Birth of Cornelius stresses that idea of going back to the roots, going back to the origin of things. So Cornelius being my name at birth. With English, I went back to my musical roots, so that was the sort of the title of the album was kind of parallel, or kind of a metaphor to what the whole idea behind the album was.
Okay. Well, how do you feel the reception's there? Because I'd actually never heard your French albums, pretty much. I heard Birth of Cornelius was kind of like my first introduction. What's the reception like, I guess, for both, obviously in the different countries that you released them? How did The Birth of Cornelius fare? As far as, I'm not talking about sales, I'm specifically talking about how people receive the actual music.
Of course. People received this album surprisingly well. I was apprehending it a bit at first, because in French and in French culture we have a history of the public, or the fans, sort of backing away from a change of language, especially if an artist well established in French is going to switch to English. We have a history of the audience and the public backing off of it and saying, "No, we're not so sure about that." And why would you have to change? Why would you feel the need to change to the English language? And so I was apprehending the reaction that I would get from this album, and it was pretty well received. And what it did also, it really drew in a lot of my fans who were really into my music, who were really into soul R&B music, as I had done it my first time around with my first French record. So they really identified with this record, even though there was a language barrier, but they could get into the sound because it was something that they felt was very authentic and very close to what they were expecting of me from a musical standpoint. But it definitely had to. Some people had to warm up to it, obviously, because the language. I mean, the language is a very important component of a music listening process in French-speaking countries. We need to understand and the words and get what they mean. So, but it's been a great reaction so far.
Want to talk about, I guess, your new project? You have a new project that's going to actually be another French album.
Yes.
And kind of talk about that, the release date of that, and kind of what's gone into that project.
Yeah, I just finished a French record, my third one, and this one's going to be released in France, October 19th. So I'm starting to promote it. I finished recording it about 3 months ago, and I'm very excited about it because it was. It's my third French record, but in fact it's my fourth record, and there's something that happened because I actually I did this record right after I did The Birth of Cornelius, and it was a different process getting into it because I was able to use both my English musical history and the artists that I grew up listening to, and incorporate that into my French musical culture, and use them both without overthinking it, because I just got into a process of recording an English record. So it's a really nice mixture thing. It's definitely it's very free. There's no there's no brain behind it, if you get what I'm saying. You don't hear me thinking while you listen to the record, which is a really cool thing. And yeah, I'm excited about it.
Okay. And you plan on being in the U.S. for a little bit while longer, I guess, doing shows. I know you have
Doing
a show
shows
tonight at SOBs. You
Yes.
kind of want to tell everybody, I guess, what other opportunities they'll have to catch you in the U.S.
I'm gonna be opening for Leela James tomorrow in Baltimore. So tomorrow's September 3rd, and I'm doing a couple of. I'm opening for K. John, September 16th, I think, and I'm also doing a Ralph Lauren GQ event here in New York for the opening of their new stores. So I'm starting to get my hands dirty here in the US.
Okay.
Yeah.
How's it? You finding a big difference, I guess, between marketing or promotion of yourself here versus in France? Obviously, a lot better known, but
Well,
the
the
US
only
side,
difference,
kind of breaking in.
the only big difference is really the changes that the market has gone through. The state of the music industry is drastically changed from when my French records were coming out. So I would say that's the biggest difference. Other than that, it's just that actually a lot about my English debut reminds me of my French debut when I first started back in 2002. So it's just always similar process, similar experiences that you go through as you start. Trying to put the word out and trying to let people know what you do, and hoping that they'll understand and appreciate it. So a lot of similarities.
Okay. If you can sum up you and your sound in 1 or 2 words, how would you do it?
Oh, that's hard. That's so hard. And to think, I've been asked that question so many times. You would think I came up with a generic answer to that, but I haven't. I would definitely say that it is. I have a song on this album, "The Birth of Cornelius," called "A Man of This World," and that's as close to defining who I am as I can get. And so my music is that. So it's a mixture of all those things. So it's Afro, it's soul, and it's pop at the same time. It's all of those things.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for having
Thank
us.
you. Thanks for
The
having
Birth of
me.
Cornelius is in stores now. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on iTunes. It's very, very good. So go out, definitely support them. And thank you once again for the interview.
Thanks for having me.
And Roddy,
It's been a pleasure.
But there's so many other things that only I understand. You're too much of everything, and I'm just a man. But I love you like no other can. But I love you like no other can. If I was nothing but beautiful,